video. Can I show a video? Huh? It's so rainy outside. And it does. It's so rainy? Yes. I know. This is a rainy, rainy day. What a lovely rainy day. You see the world out there? Yes, it's so lovely. It's so lovely. You gonna say hi to Duchu? Huh? You gonna say hi? Or are you just gonna rub up against my hand? Yes. I love you too. I love you too. What's up? Yeah. What's up? Can I record a video? Huh? Can I record a video? Huh? Maybe you'll let me record a video? Are we done with cat scratches? Alright, great. So let's talk about online banks.
So I posted a question in the community tab about if people had ever used an online-only bank. There's a bunch of them out there. Now there are also cash loadable cards, stuff like that, but those are actually different from online-only banks in a few minor ways. Now a lot of the ways they operate are the same, but those are actually different. So when I was asking about online-only banks, I was asking specifically about banks without branches, and if anybody had tried to use them, especially in a nomad lifestyle. But before we get into that, I'd like to thank this video sponsor, Skillshare. Skillshare is an amazing learning community offering thousands of inspiring classes for creatives, with classes on illustration, design, photography, video, freelancing, and much, much more. And the classes are not only precise and focused, they are broken into lessons that you can arrange into bite-sized pieces. Skillshare classes are usually under 60 minutes and combine class projects with video instruction. Because it's curated specifically for learning, there are no ads, and they're always launching new premium classes so you can stay focused and follow wherever your creativity takes you. Recently, I've been trying to increase my productivity, and one of the things that I am terrible at is keeping up with all the volume of messages I get in both email and private message form. So I watched a class called Email Productivity, Work Smarter with Your Inbox. This class is helping me create systems for staying more organized so that I can enjoy my communications with people instead of feeling overwhelmed by them. And the first 1,000 of my subscribers to click the link in the description will get a free 1-month trial of a premium membership so you can explore your creativity. Thanks to Skillshare for sponsoring this video.
I am in a very rainy parking lot right now and decided I wanted to go ahead and shoot this video that I've been thinking about for a little bit, and that is a video that discusses online banking and how it's actually helpful for travelers to have an online bank. Now, I'm not saying give up your brick and mortar bank when you decide to travel. You could have more than one bank. You could give up your brick and mortar bank and just online bank. Or you could be like, there's no way I'm just going to online bank. I want a bank that has physical locations that I can go to. And of course, there are reasons people might want these physical locations. So one of the things, interesting enough, that has always been a little bit of a challenge as far as like living off grid, living out of a vehicle, etc., has been internet. Trying to get internet while adjacent to buildings that offer free Wi-Fi, trying to hotspot from your phone, trying to find actual physical hotspots that you can use. All those concerns about internet, because internet has become so integrated into our world. So many things are done digitally now that used to be done by paper, which actually is both a good and a bad thing as far as like nomad lifestyle. The thing is, so many things being digital, including your ability to get like a virtual mailbox that can collect your paper mail, scan it, and send it to you, like these things exist. It's actually super helpful also for being off-grid, because we have these little microcomputers that all of us carry now. They don't require a lot of power to charge. So before, even with things being digital, you kind of needed to be able to get to a computer. And for like 90% of the things you could possibly possibly need, a lot of it you can access from these little microcomputers now, as opposed to having to have an actual physical computer or laptop. Like, so much of it can be done from your phone. I mean, I would say I do most of my interactions over the cell phone, just because the cell phone's going to take less power to run than the laptop, and it's easy and convenient and just always around me, so why not use it? So online banking isn't exclusive to being branchless, and by branchless I mean not having brick and mortar building locations. Almost every bank that exists now has some sort of app, especially the big ones: Bank of America, Wells Fargo, PNC, M&T Bank. Like, almost all of them have some sort of online banking function, because they wouldn't be surviving in the modern world without it. And so, like, online banking as an extension of brick and mortar banking exist, and you know, the apps as they exist have different varying levels of success, but these banks still have to maintain brick and mortar locations, and more than likely it's also the only way that you're gonna get fee-free transactions that include, like, either putting actual physical cash on your card, or depositing a check, or actually that's not true, because you can deposit checks on most apps now, or getting cash out. So cash in, cash out. Physical cash is a big deal for brick and mortar locations, and that's the advantage over them not going completely online. But online banks don't have the overhead of having to maintain buildings, having to maintain employees in those buildings, having to maintain their own ATMs. ATMs in and of themselves are a machine. It needs a place to sit, it needs to be maintained, it needs to be serviced. You know, somebody needs to go collect money from it and then get money out of it. And so, like, that whole structure existing under this umbrella of this brick and mortar bank has a lot of overhead that online banks actually don't have, and that might be a reason sometimes they can actually offer some advantages that brick and mortar banks can't. Now, the thing about a brick and mortar bank, though, is if you have a problem, you can always physically go into them. You can always physically get to a person that's connected with that bank, and you do lose something in having that disconnected experience as well. I mean, it depends on how much you really depend on that. Most of us have direct deposit now, so like, if we do a job where we are paid, whether that's regular employment, contractual employment, on and off employment, there are about 1 billion ways to make that experience completely digital, so that physical money or even physical checks never have to change hands. But there are exceptions to everything, and what fits a certain person's life is going to vary by what they experience on a daily basis. So there are a range of options out there that have been out there for a minute, have really good reviews, and I know for a while it just felt really insecure to jump on these digital only or branchless banks, because they did not have even the solid foundation of history that a lot of these brick and mortar banks do. But I think that's kind of changed. They've been doing this for a while, and honestly, these online banks don't have any more inherent risk, haven't shown any more inherent risk over time than these brick and mortar banks as far as the actual security of your money. Now, most of these online banks, and you should check before you sign up for one, are FDIC insured. Sometimes they are FDIC insured through a third party, such as Chime is actually FDIC insured through the Bancorp Bank, just for an example. Now, as far as my personal story when it comes to online banking, for those of you who don't know my story, I am based on the East Coast. I was born on the East Coast, namely Baltimore, Maryland, and my bank, why did I do that, only exists on the East Coast. Not necessarily just Maryland, but only on the East Coast, as far as like brick and mortar buildings. But even by the time I moved, which was about, what, 3-4 years ago now, by the time I moved to California, which was 2017 or 2018, I forget, I came here for an internship with a theater in Berkeley, California, and there were none of my banks on the West Coast, let alone in California. Well, at that point, I could have gotten a brick and mortar location that did have branches in California, But instead, I ended up just trying out the online bank. I was reading up on it, so I've had my online bank for several years at this point, and I was reading up about it, and honestly, it was relatively new at the time, as far as I know. Maybe I'm wrong. And I was like, okay, let's try this out. I was used to using prepaid cards, and it seemed like a lot of the structure around online banking was built just like prepaid cards. Now, there are differences, which I will get into as far as the similarity and differences, but it really is sort of this middle product between the brick and mortar bank and the prepaid card. Now, there are two versions of a prepaid card. There's a prepaid card where you put a certain amount of money on it. A lot of times these are given as gift cards, but sometimes people use them as sort of a budget amount of money that they're going to use for something. And those cards have a set amount. That's it. Once it's gone, you toss the card in the trash, which isn't great for the environment, by the way. And then there's another version that is reloadable, and so like you can put more money on it. And I really liked those in the past because they were good sort of budgetary tools for like trips or specific situations where you wanted to restrict the amount of money that could be taken out and no more than that. Because with your bank cards, a lot of times overdrafts are really easy because there's this thing that I like to call transaction limbo. And even the best banks sometimes have this happen, where you've made a transaction, but it doesn't fully go through in your card. So if you make another transaction based on the money that's still appearing as available, and sometimes this happened to me when I'm paid bills, and sometimes it's not in the bank. It's just that, you know, I've paid a bill. Yes, I still have bills. Some people think living in a vehicle means you don't have bills, but I've paid a bill. The transaction has not gone through, maybe because it's a weekend and like transactions don't get processed on Monday, or there's just a little bit of a delay. And so then I take the next action based on money that's in the account. And the next thing you know, you have an overdraft. Well, that can't really happen with a prepaid card because, like, the second you do that transaction, for some reason, these cheapo prepaid cards can do it, but your actual bank, you know, has these transaction delays, and so like as soon as you don't have enough money, you are unable to overspend. And I really like that about prepaid cards. So having this thing kind of in the middle kind of appealed to me to try it out. I was still going to leave most of my money in like what in my mind was an actual bank. These online banks are actual banks, by the way. They just do not have brick and mortar locations. They have all of the things that your regular bank has except those physical locations. But anyway, that is why I started experimenting with online banking, and since then I've been using it happily in conjunction with my other bank. Because I am hardly to never on the East Coast anyway, or anywhere where I would have a brick and mortar location, it's honestly almost equal to me at this point. I do almost all of my transactions through the actual banking app, but interestingly enough, it is the online banking card that has allowed me, when I did have to worry about putting cash in my bank account, it was the online banking card that has allowed me to do it. When I did need physical cash and want to avoid banking fees, it's actually easier to do it with my online banking card than my brick and mortar card. You might say, well, how? The advantage of the brick and mortar card is that there are physical locations attached to that brick and mortar card. Like if I have a Wells Fargo card, I know to go to the Wells Fargo bank and I can use the Wells Fargo ATM. But online banking cards or online banks have found a way around this, which is interesting because one of the things I said about these brick and mortars is they have a building, they have physical ATMs that they themselves have to care for, but online banking has found a way to also provide fee-free ATM transactions through a little third-party connection. But before we get that far, let's back up a little bit. So, like I said, online banks may be FDIC insured either through their own institution or through a third-party institution. The protections in the end, as far as like that FDIC insurance, are the same. You need to check with your bank or any bank you're considering to know what the limits of those protections are. But the FDIC can exist basically through a third-party relationship, or it can be a self-integrated relationship depending on the situation. At the end of the day, like, the app that you're using for Wells Fargo or Bank of America or whatever isn't really, as far as development and use and protection and all that stuff, any different from the type of app you're going to download to do an online only bank. The only difference is with the online only bank, you basically just have the physical app. You can log in online, but a lot of these online banks are very hardcore built around their mobile app. Not so much going online. Of course, you can access all the same information by actually logging in online, but the whole experience is built around your cell phone. And that's the difference, because for the brick and mortar app, the cell phone is the secondary experience. But as we know, everybody lives with basically one of these microcomputers mostly attached to their head. Like most of the human, nation has one of these attached to their hand. And so with these online banks, they're built to be optimized for this experience, as opposed to trying to split themselves between a mobile app, a physical banking experience, and all that. And so in order to provide these services that are so accessible through a brick and mortar, you're also relying on third-party relationships. So let's say I get a lump of cash. Let's say I've sold my van, which was a great example. That was a situation where I was given a lump of cash. I didn't want to spend that cash as cash. I wanted to put it with my other money, be able to pay bills with it, and to pay bills with it, I need to turn it into digital money. I need to put it in a bank account where I can then distribute it digitally to pay my bills, which is what I do most of the time. So is that possible when I do not have a brick and mortar location with ATMs? And the answer is yes. A lot of these online banks actually use, amazingly, places like Walgreens, CVS, 7-Eleven, Rite Aid, places that are kind of everywhere. And basically what you do is a green dot transaction most of the time. Sometimes it's another service, but it's a service kind of like Green Dot. Interestingly enough, Green Dot is responsible for the reloadable cash experience on a lot of your reloadable cash cards. Now again, it's that middle step between these two things existing, the reloadable card and the online bank that also has a brick and mortar. And so what you would do is go to, let's say, Walgreens. You would green dot that money onto your card. Now there will be fees involved, which doesn't bother me, because I have to deposit a lump sum of actual cash so rarely that, the idea that every once in a while, if I have a lot of money, or what I would consider a lot of money, some of you guys may not consider it a bunch, but if I have a few $100s that I want to put onto my card, as opposed to just holding on to the cash, so that I can do things like pay bills, which I do almost exclusively online, it's not a big deal to me to pay maybe $4 or $5. It's probably less than that. I think most of the time it comes out to around $4 or something like that, to put that money onto my online only bank card. Now, of course, with a lot of ATMs, it's going to cost, with brick and mortar locations, it's going to cost you $0 to put that money on there. But there's so many other banking fees that you're paying. The loss of those banking fees makes me not mind the every once in a blue moon where I need to pay a small fee to put cash onto my online banking card through something like Green Dot. But that's basically how it would work if you had actual physical cash that you wanted to get from actual physical cash to something on a card, so you can use it for bills or whatever else you use your banking for. So the other thing to discuss is ATMs. Now, ATMs, again, with the brick and mortar, is really simple. I bank with Bank of America. I look up the Bank of America. I go to the Bank of America ATM. Now, obviously, for a long time now, you've been able to use out-of-network ATMs. So if I do have a Bank of America card and I am at the Wells Fargo, a lot of times I can still get cash, and there are fees involved because I'm now taking money from Wells Fargo for my Bank of America, and that money is, there's a whole cycle of things that need to happen to make sure that that money is coming from the right bank, and the bank that gave me the money basically gave me a loaner knowing that it could get the cash from the other bank, but now there's interactions with the other bank, and ideally what these fees are covering is the fact that all that has to go on, but in the meantime I get to get my money and move on, and I'm just agreeing to a fee for the inconvenience to the bank, basically, because I didn't use my own bank. Well, with a lot of these online banks, what they have is they have a relationship with Allpoint ATM, and it's not exclusively Allpoint, but Allpoint is one of the ones that I know exists because I've used it for both prepaid cards and my current bank. And I don't know if there is a limited, I think it's not, I think it's unlimited fee free. And so they already have a relationship with this ATM company, and so that you can use all of these ATMs fee free, just as if it was your bank. Now the problem is, of course, now you're in a strange town. You don't know, which place is going to have, let's say it is Allpoint. Allpoint is an exclusive, but I think like that's the major one, just like Green Dot is the major one for these kind of cash transfers to reloadable cards, as it were. But anyway, usually you're just going to pick up your phone. You can go in the app. Again, the app experience is optimized for these online banks. You go to ATMs, you do a little bit of a search, and it will tell you where to go. Now, a lot of times, once again, this is going to be Walgreens, CVS, all of these other like places that are very common everywhere. And so for me personally, knowing that I could go to a 7-Eleven and more than likely I could put cash on my card or take cash out at a fee-free ATM really feels good to me. What you don't get is putting cash in through a machine or putting cash in through a teller or depositing checks through a teller. Now, in a way, you can see this is taking, quote unquote, taking away jobs, but people are already doing this for brick and mortar banks anyway. It's not like this isn't already happening. I'm just, adapting to something that makes it more convenient for me, because the likelihood I'll find a Walgreens, CVS, 7-Eleven, almost anywhere is pretty darn high, and the likelihood those will have fee-free ATMs is pretty high. And then when it doesn't happen, just like anybody else with a bank card, I can always use any machine. I can go to a Wells Fargo, I can go to a Bank of America, and the same thing will happen that happens. I will accept the fact that there's going to be fees, get my money from the Wells Fargo, and then Wells Fargo will reach out to my bank and make sure they get reimbursed for the money that I took from their machine. Now, checks used to be a big deal. As far as like if you had one, being able to deposit it, it was better to be able to do it at a physical bank. Walk in, give it to a teller, get it put on your account. But banking apps, almost all of them, and even some of the prepaid card apps, to be honest, have a way for you to take a picture of a check and then deposit it in your bank account. And that's kind of insane to me. Like, I never thought the cameras on phones would suddenly be able to like take pictures of official like money documents and actually be able to allow a deposit that way. But that's where we are in the digital age. So if you get a check, for almost every banking app in the world, you take a photo, you take a photo of the front, you take a photo of the back, and then that thing goes into your app, and next thing you know, you have the cash. You hold on to the physical check until it clears, and then you destroy the check once you know that the money has gone through. And until then, you hold on to it, until it happens. Now, with a physical brick and mortar, if anything goes wrong in that process, you can go to the brick and mortar and sort it out without having to make a phone call or contact anybody or anything like that. If for some reason things don't work with the online one, you can make a phone call, you can try to troubleshoot the process, but it is obviously easier if you can physically walk into a bank and say, here's the check that I deposited, and sort of try to start to sort through what went wrong or why you weren't giving your money or whatever. Obviously, there's all the sort of fraud systems built in for this, because you're basically taking a photo of a check and then just sending it through an app. But at this point, the actual process to success is pretty much equal, whether you have a brick and mortar bank location or you have an online only bank location. And the only problem is, on the rare chance that there's something wrong With a brick and mortar bank, you have a brick and mortar place you can walk into and try to sort out said problem. With the online only bank, not so much. Now, in almost every case, there's a delay, because with the check, of course, if the check is not with your own bank, it can take longer to confirm the money is there, because again, we're talking about banks talking to banks, and that stuff is about pretty much the same, to be honest. Like, I haven't experienced any bigger delay in the rare situation where I've had a check going through my online only bank than I have when I went through my brick and mortar bank. So I've experienced a few weird situations where I had to deal with physical cash. That is one, like when I sold my van, I had cash that I needed to put into the bank. Well, obviously, I needed to go to, weirdly enough, a 7-Eleven in order to load this money, and, you know, there were fees involved in making this cash transaction, but nothing that bothered me compared to the amount of money that I was putting in anyway. There's also been weird situations where I needed to take cash out, and you know, I wasn't sure if I had a fee-free ATM or not, and I just went to the closest ATM. But I feel like those situations will happen even with a bank card, because again, my physical bank only exists on the East Coast, and comparable to fees I would incur getting a bank with more branches, I consider the savings of the online bank to actually be more advantageous. And I've had almost zero problems as far as like checks. So check deposits through the app have been fine. And I'd been doing check deposits through my brick and mortar even when I was on the East Coast before then. So most of my money is either earned or spent digitally. Very little of it is cash in hand. At the end of the day, what I love most about the online bank is that it's almost impossible to overdraft with it, because like I said, it sits in that middle space of, you have like your brick and mortar bank, and then you have your prepaid reloadable card. And your prepaid reloadable card, once you've hit that amount of money, it says, okay, you're done. Like, if you want to buy something that's $5 and you only have $2, you can't use it. Now, in a lot of ways, prepaid cards have profited from this, because people will get to that little amount and just toss the card. Some people are smarter and they figure out a way to still use that amount of money. Like, I might have, you know, in that situation where I was given a gift card, I might have taken that last couple of dollars and like put it in Amazon or something so I could combine all the small amounts. I might have done that. But point being, it's still going to cut you off and not really allow you to overdraft the way banks can sometimes. And again, a lot of times because of what I like to call transaction limbo, where you've paid something but it hasn't shown up on your bank yet, and there's just enough of a delay to allow you to overdraft your bank. Yes, I've been poor, so I've had to like live month to month and cut it close to the line a lot. I know this is not the ideal way to live, but you only have as much money as you have, and you have as many bills as you have, and you gotta eat, and you gotta get to work, and all of those things, and life happens. With my online bank though, it's been nearly impossible to overdraft. And at the end of the day, it's a weighing of like, is it worse to get fees for a late bill or get fees from the bank for the overdraft? And that's sort of the limbo that you fall into. For me, it's always been better to like take on a late fee than overdraft the bank, and so I'd rather a charge be denied and me have to circle back and find a way to pay it, as opposed to overdrafting my bank. So for me, the benefit of having there be very little to no chance of an overdraft has made online only banks really, really valuable to me. I kind of love them for that it's really hard. Some of them do have overdraft protection features where they will give you a few dollars, i.e. back to that $2, $5 example, when you're trying to get something that costs $5 and you only have $2, and you're going to get paid within a day or two, like, it'll spot you that little bit of amount of money, so you can go ahead and get the thing that costs $5, and you'll just be like $3, you know, in debt to them when the next amount of money goes into the bank. And that's not really a big deal for them. There are some of these online banks that have these features. And that is the way in which they are different actually from prepaid cards, is they do have these other features to make them competitive with actual banks or brick and mortar banks, because they are actual banks, as opposed to just being this prepaid card that's holding money. Because they don't have a lot of overhead, sometimes they can offer actually better interest rates. Some of them do have savings accounts. You can get a checking and a savings. And some of them have really great interest rates because they don't have the overhead of holding these buildings, of managing their own ATMs. Like the fees they incur to have these third-party partnerships where you can do things like reload your card with cash money, or be able to use things like the all-point ATM system, which again is like in Walgreens and CVS and 7-Eleven and all of that. It all kind of balances out into some benefits for you in those ways, because they're not using the overhead of actually maintaining the building that is doing these things personally. And again, going back to the experience of these online banks. Yes, these online banks have online banking that you can do on a computer, but that is not what they're built around. They're built around this. Most of these online banks, the baseline of the actual company, of actually paid employees, are app developers. So the app development portion of the online bank is very high end compared to your brick and mortar bank, because your brick and mortar bank is kind of trying to divide and conquer. It's trying to have a good online banking experience for your computer. It's trying to have a good online banking experience for your phone, because they know they need to stay competitive there. It also needs to maintain its brick and mortar locations and all of those things. Whereas with these online only banks, their main experience is this experience. Yes, there is an actual website you can go on. Yes, there are customer service numbers that you can call, but those are sort of like a minor part of their structure. Their structure is a good online mobile experience, because they consider that the future. Like, it is the main way that people bank nowadays. Even online banking isn't mostly on the computer, it's mostly on the phone. And so I feel like they have sort of a better sort of niche understanding of making that phone experience smooth. Interestingly enough, once I had a problem where I needed to reach out to my bank, namely the online only bank, and there's a chat feature inside of the app itself. Inside of that app, I was able to reach someone faster than getting on the phone and calling my brick and mortar bank, which I've done before. And I value how quick that experience was, as far as like somebody jumping on the chat and my problem being sorted out. Now, you do start with a bot, and the reason why you start with a bot, as annoying as they are, is to see if the bot can can quickly resolve a problem that's common. And if the bot can't, then it connects you with a regular person. There is, as annoying as the system is, it is efficient, because things can point you to really quickly and solve your problem can be done. And when it can't do that, then it'll direct you to a person. I know how annoying the experience is, but again, it's one of those things that keeps overhead down. But it still got solved relatively quickly. It was a fraudulent charge situation, which you can dispute in the app, but one of these charges, and I hadn't caught it, was a little bit older, and so I couldn't make the app do it, and so I just ended up going through the chat feature to take care of it. And I was very pleased with it compared to the steps I have taken before on an issue when calling my brick and mortar bank. Since I do travel and I am living this nomad lifestyle now, all these things are very advantageous to me. Walgreens, CVS, Rite Aid, 7-Eleven, they really are everywhere. And if I do need to do something that's outside of the realms of digital banking, it's nice to know that it's going to be fairly common and easy for me to run across locations that would be able to help me, that exist almost anywhere. But honestly, like 90% of what I do in both of my banks is done not only online, but on the phone. So I'm always going to come back to that experience. And I think online banks are just getting better and better at it. And when you're living the nomad life, I actually believe there's more flexible options in having an online bank than in having a brick and mortar bank, because ideally, if you're living this lifestyle the way you want to live it, then you're going to be rarely to never near some dependable location where you know exactly where to go to do something like banking.
Thank you for watching another video. There is a option I didn't talk about, which is credit unions, which mostly operate like traditional banks, but a lot of people like them better. Sometimes they offer less fees. So that is a thing that's out there as well. You also have credit unions. Because I personally have never used a credit union, I don't know like how they compare to a brick and mortar bank or an online bank, or even just straight up just, you know, using a reloadable debit card. I will say, I don't think I'll ever keep all of my eggs in one basket, especially with digital money. It's nice that if something weird does happen with one account, if you have a little bit of money in a second account, whichever one you want to put like most of your eggs in, then you still have something in that second account to work with in case you need money, but for some reason you're cut off from the first account. Also, I don't know if brick and mortar banks are doing this. My bank doesn't do it. But when my card needed to be replaced, I was able to get a digital card through the online bank, which is not really an option with my personal brick and mortar bank. So it'd be interesting to hear from you guys about your experiences with banking, or even just having money on the road, how you feel about it, how big of a deal is it for you to deal with actual physical cash versus anything with a card will do. I'm just interested in hearing your thoughts and your responses to this video. I just thought it was a fun subject to attack. In the meantime, you know how we do on YouTube. In order to please the algorithm, if you like this video, hit the like, leave a comment, and if you think you'd like the channel, definitely take a chance to subscribe. Otherwise, I'll see you next time, and as always, special thanks to my supporters on YouTube memberships and Patreon.